Just imagine two guys going 7 miles down into the deepest end of the deepest ocean.
USS Windings, we have bioluminescence at 32.
Say again, over.
The deepest place on Earth is not in space, not on another planet, and not hidden behind a telescope. It is 7 miles beneath the Pacific, inside the Mariana Trench, where pressure can crush steel and rescue is impossible. We did not stop exploring it because it was empty. We stopped because every trip down reminded us of the same terrifying truth. The trench does not want visitors, and the few things we found there made it harder to stay away. The dive that made history and then scared everyone off. On January 23, 1960, Jacques Piccard and U.S. Navy Lieutenant Don Walsh climbed into a strange vessel called the Trieste and began sinking into the deepest known point on Earth, Challenger Deep, at the southern end of the Mariana Trench. The Trieste was not sleek or futuristic by modern standards. It was a bathyscaphe, a steel pressure sphere, suspended beneath a huge, gasoline-filled float, built for one brutal purpose: to survive pressure almost no human-made object had ever faced. For hours, the two men descended through darkness, deeper than sunlight, deeper than submarines, deeper than almost every living thing humans had ever observed. Then, around 30,000 feet down, something happened that could have ended the entire mission. One of the outer window panes cracked. The vessel shook. At that depth, a cracked window is not a normal mechanical problem. It is the kind of sound that makes every instinct in the human body scream to turn back. The pressure outside was not just strong, it was overwhelming, more than 1,000 times the pressure at sea level, enough to make a tiny weakness become fatal in seconds. But Piccard and Walsh kept descending, partly because they were committed to reaching the bottom, and partly because turning around in the middle of that operation was not simple or safe. They reached the seafloor at roughly 10,900 meters and stayed only about 20 minutes before returning. That brief visit proved something extraordinary. Humans could reach the deepest point on Earth and survive, but it also proved the opposite lesson. There was no margin for error. If the pressure sphere failed, nobody could rescue them. No submarine could follow. No diver could help. No emergency crew could reach them. At Challenger Deep, a disaster would not unfold slowly. It would simply happen, and the ocean would close over the evidence. Why the world looked up instead of down. After the Trieste returned, people might have expected a new age of deep ocean exploration. Instead, almost nothing happened for 52 years. That is the first great mystery of the Mariana Trench. Humanity had reached the deepest place on the planet, then basically walked away. The reason was not that scientists lost curiosity. It was that the trench had revealed itself as one of the worst investments in exploration. Terrifyingly expensive, technically unforgiving, and almost invisible to the public. The timing made it even worse. The 1960s belonged to space. The United States and the Soviet Union were racing toward the moon, and outer space had everything governments wanted: national prestige, dramatic television images, clear milestones, and the possibility of military and technological advantage. The ocean floor offered none of that. A spacecraft launch could be watched by millions. A trench dive happened in darkness. A moon landing gave the world a flag, a footprint, and a speech. A trip to Challenger Deep gave scientists a few samples, a few observations, and the knowledge that one cracked window could kill everyone involved. That is the real reason we stopped. Not fear alone, not ignorance, not conspiracy. Cost, risk, and public attention all lined up against the deep sea. Robotic vehicles slowly improved and explored many parts of the ocean, but the very bottom of the Mariana Trench remained almost untouched by direct human observation. For decades, the deepest place on Earth was less visited than the surface of the moon. The terrifying part is not just that we could not go there easily, it is that once we did, we decided the price of returning was too high. The filmmaker who broke the silence. The next human being to reach Challenger Deep alone was not a government scientist or a Navy officer. It was James Cameron, the filmmaker behind Titanic and Avatar. In March 2012, Cameron piloted the Deep-Sea Challenger, a vertical green submersible built with private funding, engineering partners, and a level of camera technology that made the mission feel as much like a cinematic expedition as a scientific one. After more than 5 decades of silence, a director famous for imagining alien worlds became the person who returned humans to the most alien place on Earth. Cameron's dive mattered because it proved that the trench could be filmed, sampled, and studied with modern tools. He spent roughly 3 hours on the seafloor, far longer than Piccard and Walsh had managed in 1960. But the dive also repeated the same pattern. The mission succeeded, the footage came back, the world paid attention for a moment, and then the vehicle did not become the beginning of routine human visits. It became another rare chapter in a place that refuses to become normal. That is the second lesson of the trench. Reaching it once is not the same as exploring it. Exploration requires repetition, maintenance, funding, replacement parts, trained crews, support ships, and the willingness to lose equipment that may cost millions. The trench punishes every weakness. Hydraulic systems leak, electronics fail, pressure housings deform, landers vanish, cameras stop working. A machine can be designed for full ocean depth and still come back damaged because the Mariana Trench is not just deep. It is hostile in a way that attacks every assumption engineers make at the surface. The private expedition that changed the scale. In 2019, Victor Vescovo and the Five Deeps expedition changed the story again. Vescovo, a businessman and explorer, led a privately funded mission to reach the deepest points in all 5 of the world's oceans. His submersible limiting factor was different from earlier one-off vehicles because it was designed for repeated, full ocean depth dives. That mattered. For the first time, Challenger Deep was not just visited as a stunt or a singular national achievement. It was approached as a place that could be returned to, mapped, sampled, and compared across dives. During that expedition, Limiting Factor completed multiple dives in the Mariana Trench, including repeated descents to Challenger Deep and a dive to Sirena Deep. This was a huge shift. In a few months, Vescovo's team generated more direct human visits to the deepest ocean than the previous half-century had produced. The trench was still dangerous, but the engineering had finally become repeatable enough to turn a legend into a research target. But the most haunting part of the Five Deep story was not just how deep Vescovo went, it was what the expedition found. The deepest place on Earth was not pristine, it was not untouched. Reports from the mission included signs of human pollution, including plastic waste. That discovery changed the emotional meaning of the trench. We had barely visited it, but our trash had already arrived. The place we treated as unreachable had been connected to us the entire time through sinking debris, currents, chemistry, and contamination. The oil-eating life at the bottom. One of the strangest discoveries linked to Challenger Deep came from microbial research. Scientists studying samples from depths below 10,400 meters found unexpectedly high levels of hydrocarbon-degrading bacteria. In simple terms, these are microbes that can break down hydrocarbons, the kinds of compounds associated with oil and other carbon-rich material. They are often discussed in the context of oil spills and polluted environments. Finding them in the deepest part of the ocean in such high abundance was startling. This is where the trench becomes more than an engineering challenge. It becomes a biological puzzle. At those depths, there is no sunlight, no plants, no photosynthesis. Food is supposed to arrive slowly from above as dead organisms, organic particles, and marine snow drifting down through the water column. Life should be limited, starved, slow, and sparse. Yet Challenger Deep appears to host microbial communities adapted to a chemical world far stranger than the old model suggested. The question is where the hydrocarbons come from. Some may come from pollution or organic matter sinking from the surface, but some research has suggested there may also be natural sources within the trench environment itself. That possibility is important because it turns the Mariana Trench from a dead endpoint into an active chemical system. The deepest place on Earth may not be just a graveyard where material falls and disappears. It may be a reactor, a place where pressure, geology, microbes, and chemistry interact in ways we are only beginning to understand. The terrifying part is the machine failure. The public often imagines the trench as terrifying because of unknown animals, giant creatures, strange shadows, something moving in the dark. But for scientists and engineers, the more immediate terror is simpler: equipment failure. At full ocean depth, the environment does not forgive small mistakes. A flawed seal, a hairline weakness, a pressure housing that behaves slightly differently than expected, and the ocean does the rest. Deep-sea landers and instruments are often designed with brutal pressure in mind, tested carefully, and still lost. Sometimes they implode, sometimes they fail to release from the bottom, sometimes they return with damaged components, sometimes they never return at all. Every mission to the Hadal Zone, the region deeper than 6,000 meters, involves accepting that some equipment may be sacrificed. In shallow water, losing an instrument is expensive. At Challenger Deep, losing an instrument is almost expected. That is why exploration has remained so limited. The Mariana Trench is not only a place to visit, it is a place that consumes machines. To explore it properly, scientists need repeat missions. Long-term sensors, cameras, samplers, landers, mapping tools, and vehicles that can survive repeated dives. Every one of those tools must be built to survive pressure that can turn ordinary engineering into scrap. The terrifying reason we stopped exploring was never just one cracked window. It was the realization that the trench turns every expedition into a gamble with no rescue plan. The discovery that challenged an old rule. The competitor script's strongest newer twist is the dark oxygen story, even though it comes from outside the Mariana Trench itself. In the Clarion-Clipperton zone of the Pacific, around 4,000 meters deep, Professor Andrew Sweetman and his team measured oxygen levels in sealed chambers placed on the sea floor. The expectation was simple. In darkness, without photosynthesis, oxygen should decline as organisms consume it. Instead, the readings rose. That result was shocking, because biology has long treated photosynthesis as the main source of free oxygen on Earth. Plants, algae, and phytoplankton use sunlight to produce oxygen. Without light, deep environments are expected to consume oxygen, not create it. Sweetman's team proposed that polymetallic nodules, small mineral-rich rocks containing metals like manganese, nickel, and cobalt, might be generating enough electrical potential to split seawater into hydrogen and oxygen. In other words, the seafloor might be producing oxygen chemically without sunlight. The finding is controversial and still debated. Some researchers have questioned whether the measurements truly prove oxygen production or whether experimental artifacts could explain the results. That debate matters. It means this is not a closed case. But even the controversy reveals something important. The deep ocean still contains processes strange enough to challenge basic assumptions. The abyss is not fully understood. The old model of a dark, passive seafloor is being tested by data that does not fit neatly. Why? This connects to the Mariana Trench. The dark oxygen discovery was not made at Challenger Deep, but it belongs in this story because it changes the way we think about deep ocean environments. For decades, the deepest ocean was treated as a place where life survives only on leftovers from above. Sunlight drives life at the surface. Dead material sinks. Deep organisms scrape by. But hydrocarbon-degrading microbes in the Mariana Trench and possible oxygen-related chemistry in the abyssal Pacific both point toward the same larger possibility. The deep ocean may have more local energy and chemical complexity than we assumed. That is the original twist for this version. The terrifying reason we stopped exploring the trench was pressure, cost, and risk. But the reason we need to go back is that the trench may not be an empty pit. It may be part of a hidden chemical engine running beneath the ocean. We used to imagine the deep as the end of the world, a cold sink where life slows down and matter disappears. Now, evidence suggests the deepest places may recycle, transform, and even generate chemical opportunities for life in ways that are still unresolved. That idea matters far beyond Earth. If life can survive, adapt, and organize itself around darkness, pressure, geology, and chemistry at the bottom of our ocean, then the search for life elsewhere changes too. The trench becomes not only a place to study Earth, but a rehearsal for alien oceans. Why NASA cares about the deep sea? NASA cares about the deep ocean because some of the most promising places for life beyond Earth are not dry planets with blue skies. They are ocean worlds. Jupiter's moon, Europa, is believed to have a global ocean beneath an icy shell. Saturn's moon Enceladus shoots plumes of water vapor and ice from cracks near its south pole, suggesting a hidden ocean interacting with a rocky interior. These worlds have no sunlight reaching their oceans. If life exists there, it would likely depend on chemistry, minerals, water-rock reactions, and energy from below. That is why NASA's Subsea program matters. Subsea, working with partners including NOAA and the Ocean Exploration Trust, studies underwater volcanic and vent environments on Earth as analogues for ocean worlds. The logic is simple. If scientists want to design future missions to Europa or Enceladus, they need to understand what life, chemistry, and energy look like in Earth environments that resemble those alien oceans. The deep sea becomes a training ground for space exploration. This is where the Mariana Trench becomes even stranger. The deepest place on Earth may be less explored than many planetary surfaces, but it could hold clues for recognizing life beyond Earth. Oil-eating microbes, pressure-adapted organisms, Hadal chemistry, dark oxygen debates, and seafloor energy systems all push the same question: how much life can exist without sunlight? If the answer is more than we thought, then Earth's deepest ocean becomes a warning. We may have been looking for life in the wrong way, both here and beyond. What may still be hiding there? When people ask what is still hiding in the Mariana Trench, they often imagine giant, unknown animals. That is understandable, but the more likely answer is stranger in a quieter way. What is hiding there may be entire microbial systems, chemical pathways, pressure-adapted enzymes, new species of small organisms, unknown geological processes, and evidence of how life survives at the edge of what biology can tolerate. There are animals in the trench, including amphipods, sea cucumbers, snailfish in Hadal zones, and other organisms adapted to crushing pressure. But the real mystery is not one monster in the dark. It is the system. How does enough food arrive? How do microbes process carbon? How do pollutants reach the bottom? How do trenches trap, concentrate, or transform material? How does life protect its proteins and cell membranes under pressure that would destroy ordinary organisms? Every answer could matter for medicine, biotechnology, climate science, and astrobiology. The Mariana Trench may also be hiding the record of what humans have done to the planet. Pollutants, plastics, and chemical traces sink into the deep. The trench is not separate from us. It is downstream from civilization. That means exploring it is not only about discovery, it is about accountability. The deepest place on Earth may contain both life we never imagined and evidence of damage we never intended to send there. The real reason we have not finished exploring it. We did not stop exploring the Mariana Trench because scientists were afraid of a creature. We stopped because the trench defeats budgets, machines, and human confidence. It is difficult to reach, harder to study, and almost impossible to rescue from. The world looked to space because space gave clearer symbols and better politics. The trench gave silence, darkness, and broken equipment. But the story is changing. Private explorers reopened the door. Better submersibles and full ocean depth landers made repeated visits possible. Genetic sequencing made microbes visible in ways cameras never could. LiDAR and sonar mapping improved our understanding of seafloor terrain. NASA's interest connected deep ocean exploration to the search for life beyond Earth. The trench is no longer just a geographical extreme. It is a scientific crossroads. The terrifying reason we stopped was that we realized how vulnerable we were down there. The reason we are returning is that we now realize how much we may have missed. Every new sample from the deep ocean seems to make the old picture less complete. The trench is not just a hole. It is an archive, a pressure chamber, a chemical laboratory, a pollution trap, and perhaps the closest thing Earth has to an alien ocean. In the end, the Mariana Trench did not scare humanity away because it was boring. It scared us because it was too dangerous, too expensive, and too unforgiving to explore casually. A cracked window on the Trieste showed how close the first dive came to disaster. The 52-year silence after 1960 showed how hard it was to justify going back. James Cameron proved we could return. Victor Vescovo proved we could return repeatedly. And the discoveries that followed, from hydrocarbon-degrading bacteria to the dark oxygen debate, proved the deepest ocean still has secrets powerful enough to challenge what we think life needs to survive. So what do you think is still hiding at the bottom of the Mariana Trench? Unknown species, strange microbes, chemical energy systems, or something even more unexpected? Drop your theory in the comments. And if you want more stories about the places on Earth that still feel almost alien, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next one.